All right, let's go to the story. This is a really crazy story that broke, at least to us this morning. Oh, yeah, it did this morning because that's when they're having their state of state in Georgia. Usually we do it at night, but they do it apparently during the day. Senator Colton Moore, who was on the show before, we actually know is some of his political people. We actually reached out to him. I was going to have Colton Moore on the show here. I couldn't have Colton Moore on the show because he's still in jail. So let's pull up the B1, Dawson. This is him actually being arrested in outside the Minnesota House chambers. Go ahead and hit play on that. You can go full screen on it too. This is a state senator in the state of Georgia being arrested outside of the Georgia House chambers.
Oh, you said Minnesota before. I was like,
did I say Minnesota before?
Like, what is he
I'm
doing
so
in
used to
Minnesota?
talking about Minnesota. We talk a lot about Minnesota stuff, but in this case, it's Georgia.
This guy's been on the show before?
This guy's been on the show.
Yes,
I'm trying to remember what we had him on for, Jesse.
Was it the airport thing?
He was also with that, but we ended up having somebody on.
He was trying to fire Fannie Willis and cut the funding.
There you go. He's cutting the funding to Fannie Willis, the prosecution against Donald Trump. Okay. There you go. I think they have a big RINO problem down in Georgia, as far as I can tell. Okay, so why he is being handcuffed is an interesting story. By the way, let's also go to the second one here, the B2. This is him, and let's get audio for this. This is him being shoved to the ground. So this is apparently, I think this is the attorney for the Speaker of the House I had seen somewhere, but I don't know that to be true.
Nobody.
He went down pretty easy on that one. I think he was just trying to make sure that he doesn't push at all, that he's not the aggressor.
It has gone too far.
That was...
I have an obligation to be in that room. I represent 200,000 people in Northwest Georgia who duly elected me to be here today.
That's so fun.
Okay, so now what led to this is the interesting thing. So he has apparently been censored by the I keep doing it. The Georgia House for giving a speech. And I think we found the speech. They got him censored. So he's not supposed to be allowed into the Georgia State House. Here's the problem. He's a state senator, and Governor Kemp was giving the State of a State address to a joint session. So where I would argue, I guess you could have a state senator kicked out of a house most of the time, but not when he has a legal authority to be there, a joint session of the legislature. How can you stop? And there's actually a law in Minnesota, and I was talking to political people because there's probably one in Georgia. It's illegal to prohibit a state legislator from conducting business or to show up to the legislature. Mm-hmm. So the only reason he was going in the Georgia House at that point, just like if it was a State of the Union by the president, is they use the House because the House is the bigger body, right? There's more seats, and so it's easier to get the Senate into the House chambers than it is to put House members in the Senate chambers. Does that make sense? So he has a right as a member of the legislature, a state senator, to show up to the joint. In fact, he's got a duty, I would argue. Democrats would disagree with that in Minnesota, right? They don't believe you have a duty to show up, but he has a duty to show up for a joint legislative session, and that's what got him arrested. Now, this is the Chattanoogan.com. Let's go to the B3. This is one of, and I wish we could have him on, but yeah, apparently Colton is still in jail. Senator Colton Moore of Dade County. By the way, this was written earlier this morning before. Oh no, I'm sorry. This has been updated now. Okay, when I read it before, it was before he got arrested. Senator Colton Moore arrested, taken to jail after defying House Speaker's order not to attend joint session. Senator Colton Moore of Dade County was arrested on Thursday morning after he defied the order of Georgia House Speaker John Burns that he would not be allowed for a joint legislative session in Atlanta. Senator Moore's staff said, "This is a chilling reminder of how far the deep state and career politicians will go to silence America First conservatives. This isn't just an attack on Colton Moore, it's an attack on you, the people who elected him to fight against the corrupt Georgia establishment." Senator Moore had said Wednesday, Speaker John Burns is attempting to arrest and block me from representing the 53rd District at tomorrow's State of the State joint session. This corrupt move is an attempt to silence your voice and mine. The Burns letter to Senator Moore said, on Thursday, January 16, 2025, members of the General Assembly will gather in the House chamber for Governor Brian Kemp's 7th State of the State address. As you recall, on March 14th, 2024, following your vile, disparaging, and false comments in reference to the character of former Speaker David Ralston, whatever, because how, by the way, I just read this from my vantage point and just assume that the speaker was corrupt. You know, like I just assume you didn't have like this real patriotic Speaker of the House, right? So I'm guessing Colton Moore, without even knowing the dynamics here, is probably right, because what speaker is not incredibly corrupt, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Speaker David Ralston, because House rules require me to uphold the decorum of the House and decency of speech. I subsequently ordered the doorkeeper of the House, Corey Mulkey, to prevent your entrance onto any property of the Georgia House of Representatives, especially the House chamber. This letter serves as a reminder that my order is still in effect and you are not allowed to enter the House chamber. This includes joining your colleagues from the Senate for the State of the State address unless you deliver a sincere apology to the family, extended family, and loved ones of former Speaker David Ralston from the floor of the Senate before January 16, 2025. Senator Moore told the House Speaker his letter was unconstitutional, illegal, and the most disgraceful piece of correspondence issued by a legislator in the history of the state of Georgia. He said, Your acts constitute both an impermissible censorship of my voice as an elected state senator and an unlawful obstruction of my sworn duties to the people of Georgia. Senator Moore said he wanted to inform you of my presence at the session and said his order was unenforceable and invalid. Can somebody stop a state senator from completing his duties as a legislator? I assume that it's the same as in Minnesota. You cannot do that. I'm assuming Georgia has it. I don't know. I'm not a scholar on Georgia statutes.
Yeah, I think it's sketchy legal territory even to prevent a citizen from attending Capitol events, which I know that there's all kinds of cases where that happens, where individual citizens are, given trespasses from the state Capitol building. But to do that to a state senator on, just on the other side of the building to the House chamber, it's insane. It shows that these, at least the Speaker of the House, he appears to be power hungry and on a power trip to, to try to demand an apology. And, the whole story is just nuts.
Why not just write the apology? Did he say something that was like...
Well, we're going to watch it. I haven't watched it. It was sent to me right before the show started, so we're going to watch it together. But I think there's an argument to be made if someone was disruptive in the House chambers, that you could ban them from entering the House, I guess, right? I think there's decorum that needs to happen. So that makes sense from the public perspective. But if you are a duly elected legislator, you can't stop them from performing their functions, Certainly, one violation doesn't mean that you could just prohibit them from any functions in the future. Now, imagine if they're trying to...
Especially just because you didn't like a speech that they gave on the floor. I mean, that happens all the time with these politicians.
I've seen lots of crazy speeches, so here we go. First time watching it. You guys get to see it with us. Dawson, let's pull up this speech that apparently is the reason he can't enter the House floor again.
Conviction from the previous speaker. Majority Leader referenced fierce independence. Well, I reckon the speaker and myself come from a similar bloodline. Because, Senators, I rise today in a steadfast opposition to Senate Resolution 687. My fellow senators, I think to bring a comparison to who this man was, we should first look at one of the greatest Georgians to ever live. A man who is globally recognized as a symbol of justice. Who am I talking about? Martin Luther King Jr. A man, what did he say? He said an injustice anywhere was a threat to justice everywhere. Powerful words that we should think about as we vote for this resolution. Because this body is about to perpetually memorialize, in my opinion, one of the most corrupt Georgia leaders we'll ever see in our lifetimes. I first remember learning about a girl named Haley when I served in the chamber across the way. Haley was brutally raped, sodomized in her living room by a man her family trusted. That man was Jason Brothers, and he hired Speaker David Ralston as his attorney, not to defend him, but to protect him from justice. You see, for nearly a decade, this case rocked on, and Haley became terminally ill, never seeing justice. Her family once walked in on her in a bathtub with blood as she contemplated suicide. And you probably say, Senator, well, that's just one case. Where can you go with that? But no, there were several more. There was a case of a lady who lost her daughter in her arms as she bled out because a man was driving drunk. Destroyed the woman's family. But she wasn't able to get justice because the man charged with the DUI hired Speaker David Ralston as his attorney. You see, there was a man named Derek Key who for 10 years delayed cases after molesting a 14-year-old child being protected by David Ralston. Now, how did David Ralston do this? We heard about him being chairman of Judiciary Non-Civil. Well, back in 2006, there was a bill called Senate Bill 503. The man created the legislative leave and then profited off of it, making hundreds of thousands of dollars protecting people from justice. You see, the truth is hard to hear.
Senator,
Mr. President.
we got decorum, rules here in this chamber. And I think you've made your point, sir. So if you could just go ahead and wrap up, we'd be appreciative.
Mr. President, I know it's hard to hear, but there were thousands of case delays. And make no mistake, these egregious examples I've given is no semblance of morality. You see, we as lawmakers are supposed to protect the vulnerable, Mr. President. We're supposed to protect children. We're supposed to protect law enforcement officers. Think about the law enforcement officers who were assaulted and weren't able to get to justice because of this man. You see, the Speaker turned a blind eye to what we as legislators know to be truth. And records show that after he was Speaker, he did not attend another court case. You see, he had more than 164 clients because if you're not trying those clients, you just pick up more and more of them. No court, less work. He had an operation. He was running an industry, Mr. President, and all he was using was a simple form letter, sending it to the court, referencing the code section that the man created in 2006.
Senator, not the time or place. Not the time or place.
Wait, why not?
Mr.
Go ahead
President,
and yield the well, Senator.
at your request.
Wait, why is it not time and place?
Well,
I don't understand.
I think
if
I was
you're
just-
doing a resolution honoring somebody, but that person's
Yeah,
got a
right.
sketchy
That would
past,
be the time to talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But I guess, I was just reading, so it looks like there was some kind of portrait unveiled of the Speaker at the Capitol building that day. So they're saying, why do you have to say this today? But, if he was a scumbag attorney, you should be able to say that.
Yeah.
Did he just die or something? Like, was it?
I
recent?
think he died in 2022. It looks like. So this
If
was
it was
a few
like
years
last
later.
week, then that's that's one thing.
Well, but still, if you're doing a specific legislative act where you're passing a resolution honoring someone's contributions, right? And that person's a scumbag. Let me just give you a good case in point. Nancy Pelosi, Like, you can't speak out about all the corrupt shit she has done over her time. That's not called for. Yes, it is. How about you don't vote for these resolutions? How about you stand up and stop? I'm so sick of these people.
And
that are
especially in that
swamp
situation
creatures.
where it's, I'm sure it's less well known who that guy actually
Right.
is. So it's kind of more incumbent on these senators and legislators to inform the people of who exactly it is they're going to honor.
I'm curious what their decorum rules are now, because he said it like there was a specific one saying don't talk bad about dead people, but that wouldn't make any sense. I wonder what their-
Decorum is very generic, and if they don't like what you're saying, they will find it to be against decorum.
Maybe it's that
crazy.
Southern niceness law or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So that apparently is what got this guy banned from the House. But I go back to, he is performing his legislative duties to go to the state of state. How do you ban him from the House chambers? He's doing his legislative duty. There is Minnesota law against that. I'm sure Georgia's got some kind of law. We're going to have Andy Parrish here in a second. He's going to tell us a little bit about the TikTok ban. But I want to get into another segment.